Hello, hello. It's young Penitent back with another episode, another live stream, and somebody's watching. So I got a little bit of a cold today. I wasn't. Oh, look, I forgot to. Whatever, that's fine. Got all my prayer books sitting there. I forgot. I didn't actually get to church today because I'm a little bit sick, but not sick enough to cancel my live stream. So here we go. And today the topic is going to be the fools for Christ. And this is something that is a little kind of, I'd say, close to my heart. This is topic that kind of drew my attention, so to speak, because I have a mental illness, as I've talked about on this channel before quite a bit. So if you have watched if you've been following me closely, you know that I have a mental illness. Which one? I actually have schizoaffective disorder, and so that's known as a serious mental illness. And why is that? Why? So of course that kind of makes sense why the fools for Christ would draw my attention. Because what is a fool for Christ? A fool for Christ is a category of saint in the Orthodox Church, and it is the rarest form of saint, the rarest kind. It is the rarest form of asceticism that exists, and I believe it is unique to the Orthodox Church. And what is foolishness for Christ's sake? Well, it is not saints that were insane. I'll have to come out and say that. What I'm going to say first, what it's not. It's not people who are insane, who maybe by virtue of their insanity had some special gift and were able to, be holy because of their insanity. No, it wasn't that. It wasn't people who were simple-minded, simple people, or unlearned people. Fools for Christ were people, saints, who acted as if they were insane. Not just acting foolish, being silly, making jokes, that kind of thing. No, actual insanity. They would mimic actual behavior of insane people who have serious mental illness. And these days, you don't really see it. Where do you see insanity? You see insanity, well, if you went to a state hospital or a psych ward, or you worked in that, insanity is kind of swept under the rug in our society. You're not going to come in contact with it too much, honestly, in your day-to-day. They're not going to be in your people who are insane, who are acting insane, who don't have their insanity controlled. They're not going to probably be in your workplace. You might see some dirty person walking down the street talking to himself, or under a bridge. Homeless people are often have insanity, and that's how they end up homeless, because they're not able to make it. They're not able to function in the society. Insane people are also, like I said, in psych wards. Sometimes you might know someone who in your family or a friend who did go insane, and you witnessed that. But in general, the insane people are they're kind of out of view from society. You don't see it all too much, but they're there. They're definitely a certain portion of the population in every society that has insanity. And people who are insane, they do not quite get respect. I'll say it. I'm going to say that. And if you have insanity, you know this. They say it's what do they say? It's a stigma. They say there's a stigma. And from they say people who are insane, they're not treated so nice. People will judge you. They don't want to be friends with you. They'll shun you. They will, in today's world, we're a little bit, we think of ourselves as more enlightened, maybe, and we understand mental illness a little better. So maybe people are treated a little better than they were in the past. So historically, these insane people, they would, people wouldn't put up with fools. They would, if someone came around acting crazy because they're crazy, they would get beaten. They would say, get out of here, go away from us. They would be objects of scorn and derision. And that is the reason why these saints, the rarest form, as I said, there's only about 36 that have been canonized officially as fools for Christ's sake. There's only about 36 in the history of the church. We have thousands and thousands of saints, and only 36 have been categorized. Now, there may have been more. There are saints that are unknown, saints that haven't been officially recognized or canonized, but that's a small number, 36. And so today we're going to get into all this. We're going to go through it, talk about, how do these people acted? Where does it come from? So if you're watching, please hit the like button and let's begin. So let's begin with the scriptural foundation. That's where I'm going to begin with. We sort of have precursors to this behavior of the fools for saints in the Old Testament, with the prophets. For example, the prophet Elijah, also known as Elias, he walked naked and shoeless for 3 years as a way to warn the people of Israel of a coming captivity. Ezekiel, he slept before a brick and he ate bread cooked on a fire made of human dung. And by this also symbolizing the coming captivity of Israel. Hosea married a prostitute to show Israel how they were being basically prostitutes before God. So here we have examples of these saints, these prophets, who they're acting a little foolish. They're acting with folly, and they have behavior that their actions have symbolic meaning and prophetic. And it's prophetic. The symbolic meaning of their actions is prophetic. It's typified. They're telling you in a hidden way something that's going to come to pass. But they're not. This is not exactly the type of foolishness for Christ that we talk about with the fools for Christ, the category of saints, because we didn't think they were acting a little foolish, yes, but we did not think that they were insane. We didn't come on. Maybe some people thought that's what an insane person would do, but we weren't thinking of them as mentally ill. But it's kind of a type of a fool for Christ. So we have that in the Old Testament. And so going further in now, walking into the New Testament, we have we have a few examples of people who are thought to be mad. Christ himself was accused by the Pharisees who said, is it not wrong that we say you are mad and have a devil? They thought Christ was insane. And some people have thought that if Christ was alive today, that they would put him in an insane asylum. They say, "Oh, you think you're God, huh? We're going to lock you up and drug you." That probably could happen. And in fact, it does happen. There's probably plenty of people who say I'm Christ, and I've gone through that myself. It's a phase. We all go through that phase. We think we're Christ. We think we're God, right? Didn't you? I know I did. And the Apostle Paul was also accused of being mad when he was in the court, and they were saying, "Much learning doth make thee mad," something like that. I can't remember the exact quote. And the Apostle Paul talks quite a lot throughout his letters. He talks quite a lot about foolishness. What he's doing, and he's saying, he's contrasting the teaching of Christ with the wisdom of the world, and he's saying Christianity is, when you compare it with the wisdom of the world, is foolishness. But this is a little bit different than what we're talking about with the folly for Christ's sake. So this is a foolishness. The Greek word that he was using was moros, which is like a fool in the sense of just kind of being silly, not necessarily insane, like a fool, a stupid person, a silly person, someone who has no sense, but not someone who's actually insane with like a mental illness, a crazy person. So it's a little bit different, but there is a basis in Scripture. We can draw from Scripture as a basis for this kind of saint. Hello to everybody watching. We have Slow Boy Whiteboard in the chat, and I've seen this person in quite a few chats. And I have to say on YouTube, and I have to give props to these people who are populating the chat rooms for the Orthosphere on YouTube, because these people are, you guys deserve a little bit of a round of applause, because you guys are putting in work. You guys are making the streams more interesting and entertaining for people. You're encouraging the content creators themselves. And I don't know if you guys actually go on, ever go on the shows. Maybe you don't want to put your face out there. Maybe public speaking isn't your thing, but you guys are definitely doing some work. You guys are, pitching in, so to speak. And, I think it would actually be cool. I think a lot of these people who are in the comments are friends with each other because they spend so much time in the chats. I think it might even be fun to like bring a bunch of these people on a show. So if you guys would like to do that, actually maybe send me an email or something, and maybe we could put together a show with the YouTube chat commenters, and we can bring them on if they want a chance to show their face. I don't know. So continuing on, all right. Thank you for all there. We got a little bit of activity in the chat, and that encourages me. So but the type of fool, the Greek word that Paul was using was moros, but the Greek word for the fools for Christ is salos, which means mentally deranged, someone who actually has a mental illness. Christ. Oh, let's see. Oh, but we do have the term I want to is drawn from the first letter of the Apostle Paul to the Corinthians, 1:4-10. He says, "We are fools for Christ's sake." And he also a little earlier, so that's where the term comes from. And he also a little earlier says, "If any among you seemeth to be wise in this world, let him become a fool, that he may be wise." So the Apostle Paul is inviting people. He is saying, be a fool. Be a fool. We're not seeking after what the world seeks after. We're seeking after spiritual things, and people who are not spiritual, they don't understand. It does not make sense to them. They can't even perceive why we act the way we do. They don't really understand our way of living as Christians. So how did these people act? What was going on? So first of all, I have to say that the fools for Christ were people who had like I said, it's the rarest form of asceticism, and it's also a very advanced form of asceticism. Very few can do this. This is for people who have already attained a state of dispassion, impassibility. They are not harmed. Their spiritual state does not change when they're faced with temptations. So, for example, there were saints who were fools for Christ. This happened repeatedly, who would go into brothels around prostitutes, and they would not be, by looking at them and seeing their behavior, they would not be, for example, aroused sexually, because they had already attained a state of impassibility. And what was the profit? What was the purpose of going? What did it profit them? What was the purpose of going into a brothel, for example? Then people would judge them. They would look down on them. They would think less of them, and they would acquire humility. That's the main purpose. The main purpose of the fools for saints, the fools for Christ, is so that they would acquire humility by acting the way that they did, for people looking at them with disdain and not liking them, and so forth. Often they would get beaten. They would get chased out of town, But this is normally by the normal townsfolk. People who are spiritually advanced, of course, would recognize their spiritual state, and they would show them respect. What kind of other, as this rappers say, game recognizes game, right? So if you were spiritually advanced, you would recognize that this person is just acting foolish. Um, so what other kind of uh, behavior were they doing? They would go around, they would laugh. There's a kind of mental illness where there's uncontrollable laughter, a type of it's actual, like, in the diagnostic and statistical manner, where a person can't control their laughter and they would just start laughing. And actually, I met someone who I didn't, when I was in the state hospital, there was a person there who had this specific type of illness, and he would all of a sudden just laugh, ha 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 ha. It was a kind of actually a pretty cool laugh, but he couldn't control it. And that's actually in the DSM. And so the saints would do this. Another form of schizophrenia, a symptom, is mutism, where they don't talk. And so some of these saints would do that, or they would mime. They would mime, and they would or mirror a person's behavior, that kind of thing. They would dress in rags, often just a loincloth, sometimes completely naked. They would also flaunt the rules of the church. So maybe, for example, it was the first day of Lent, and they would go into the market and they would eat meat in front of everybody. So everyone would be like, oh, this person's supposedly holy, but they're eating meat during Lent, But this was a way to sort of, they did that as a way to sort of, there are Pharisees. We don't want to approach the fast in a pharisaical manner, or neither all the other things that we do in the church. So, for example, we just had today Sunday of the publican and the Pharisee, and that's why we don't fast for the week following. This coming week is fast free, because we don't want to be proud of our fasting. So it presupposes a high spiritual state, someone who is already advanced spiritually, who has attained impassibility. And so that's why we do not recommend that you try this at home. We do not recommend to probably the people watching, to me, to you, do not go and try to pretend to act insane, because this is something you need. You need a blessing from your spiritual father. You need to already be advanced, and we don't really have that. If we're honest with ourselves, we are not spiritually advanced. We're just poor sinners, and we're just kind of lying prone and prostrate on the ground, and we are subject to our own passions. So this is not something we should try at home. I mean, if you were going to try that and you were thinking of doing this, I would suggest you talk to your spiritual father first. I have actually done this. I said to my spiritual father, do you think I could maybe become a fool for Christ? And he said, no, don't do it. Yes, I actually asked. Well, at least I asked, and now I don't have to worry about it anymore. So if you're thinking about doing this, maybe you could bring that up with your spiritual father. The first recorded and recognized saint as a spirit who was a fool for Christ was Saint Amonis, who was an ascetic in the 4th century in the Egyptian desert. And there were probably people who were doing this form of asceticism before him, maybe not full blown, but in small ways. But he was the first who was recognized. And the most well-known, the first for whom we have a life written, was Saint Simeon. And I haven't actually read this book, but I think he was the 6th century. And I actually looked it up. You can go and buy this book. They still have a life written of him. And actually, it would be interesting to read. They have it on Amazon. It's like a 150-page book. And it shows all of his exploits and how he acted. Now, I said that there are only 36 fools for Christ in the Orthodox Church. 6 of them are Greek. The majority of them are Russian. There's something about the Russian soul, the Russian psychology, that it drew this type of person to themselves. It was a type of saint that was beloved to the Russians, and it's somehow, they say that it fits their character. So there were quite a few fools for Christ in the Russian land. In fact, there were so many that there was often people who were deceived, people who would go about and act insane, but they didn't have a blessing from God. This has to be a specific calling from God. God will tell the ascetic, you are to go do this. And we're not advanced enough to know even what God is telling us to do. But these fools for Christ, often they were monastics. They had gone away to a monastery and they had become hermits or something and advanced far into the spiritual life. And then they would come back. They would come back into the world and do this although they had already attained humility to a degree, they wanted to attain humility to a superlative degree, and also perhaps to profit the people who they were around. A couple well-known ones we have in the Russian land are Saint Basil, who's the person you see St. Basil's Cathedral with the beautiful spires and the colorful domes in Moscow. That is actually named after St. Basil, the Fool for Christ. There's also Saint Xenia, who we know about her life. She's fairly well known. Her husband died when they were young, and she was very grieved from his loss. And she went off and disappeared for a while, and it is posited, we do not know for sure, but people believe that she went to a monastery for 8 years before coming back to the world. And then she would go around dressed in her husband's jacket until that wore out. And then she would go around dressed in rags and, act crazy, but the people loved her. And she... sometimes these saints, they act prophetically with their words. For example, so Saint Xenia, one day she went about the whole town saying, bake pancakes, make pancakes. All of Russia will be baking pancakes. And people were like, what is she talking about? Here's crazy Xenia again. But the next day, what happened? The Empress Elizabeth died. And so... what do people do in Russia after at funerals? They bake pancakes. So all of a sudden, everyone understood why she was talking. So this is an example of the symbolic acts of these saints that are prophetic. Often these saints, the fools for Christ, can be a prophetic ministry, and often it is. There was another couple. Where was their names? I had them written here. There were two. There's a funny story. Saint Theodore of Novgorod and Blessed Nicholas Konchanov were saints in neighboring cities, both fools for Christ. And here's a little story about them that I think is amusing. So the two cities were in a feud, and they were battling with each other. They had this feud between the cities. And so these two saints, being aware of this, and in order to make fun of the people, they started having a feud between themselves, the two fools for Christ. And one day they both ran out onto the water, walking on water, hurling insults at each other, walking on the water, and throwing cabbages at each other to show the people how silly it was for these two brother cities to be at war with each other. So that was, I think, to me, a funny story about how they would act. And sometimes we have saints who would be fools for Christ, but only in a less obvious way. So our own Saint John Maximovich of Shanghai and San Francisco, he's known to have gone about in barefoot, and he he's not he's not mainly considered a fool for Christ, but he did use this technique at times. He would generally flaunt social conventions, and there's a well-known story that here, I don't know, I've heard this story multiple times in different churches here in the West Coast of America, where he was the hierarch of our diocese, and there's a story that he got invited to this woman's house, and this woman was an aristocrat or a rich lady, and she was all dressed as a peacock, dressed up as a peacock, so they say. She had all her colorful, nice clothes on, and she was so proud of herself that she had the archbishop was coming. She had invited the archbishop to dinner, so she was just kind of acting like this and showing herself off that she had the archbishop eating dinner with her. And so in order to kind of bring this woman down a notch, so to speak, he was eating his soup, And he kept letting all the soup just fall into his beard till his beard was just full of chunks of the onion and the meat, whatever was in the soup. His beard was just full of food. And he was doing this this was his foolishness for Christ that he was doing. And so that is, I don't know if you've heard that story where you are, but I've heard that story from multiple different priests here in the Western American diocese. It's sort of a favorite, I guess, a well-known story about Saint John. Let's see. The Fools for Christ would also be able to reprove those who are in power. So Saint Basil, the Fool for Christ, who I mentioned in Moscow, he actually reproved the Tsar. And the Tsar did nothing about it. In fact, he made sure the Tsar, who was Ivan the Terrible, who would often kill people who looked at him funny, he would not let anything be done to Saint Basil. Okay, so I think that's probably what I wanted to say about the Fools for Christ. You know, they're acting crazy. They aren't really crazy. If they want, they can go and, if they go back to their cell or wherever, they will act normal around their people who know them well. It's all an act. Just remember that. That's the main point. And it's an act so that they can gain humility. That's the main reason they are doing this. And I also wanted to just say a word about the stigma of mental illness. It's true, people. I kind of feel a little bit of a stigma when people find out that I have a mental illness. You are maybe perhaps not quite as respected. You're sort of a tier down. You're not quite. You're not quite. I guess you're almost like a second-class citizen. And it's true. But I don't know, maybe I deserve it. Maybe I get some humility from that. Maybe that's good. And even if people don't know, I wanted to say, this is something I was thinking about recently. If people don't know, if I don't tell people that I have a mental illness, they will still treat me with the stigma because I'm acting strange. I'm acting not quite normal. They pick up on this stuff, but they don't realize why I act this way, why I can't, I don't communicate normally. I mean, I kind of come off as, you guys might see me and I'm talking to you here, I sort of come off as kind of normal, but if you would see me in my day-to-day life, I don't have normal relationships with people. I don't express myself it's just in the normal way. So there's no way around it. I'm going to have the stigma against me, whether I tell people or not. If they know, then I'll have the stigma because they know. If I don't tell them, then they're going to figure out that something's not right here anyways. So you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. But there's my stream there. I came out with something, it's been a couple weeks. So I felt I needed to come back on here. This is creative activity, making YouTube content, and I wanted to show people that I still love you. I'm still coming. I haven't forgot about you. I'm trying to keep doing this, but creative activity really takes quite a bit of it takes quite a bit out of you. It takes what does it take? It takes energy. You have to think about it, plan ahead, all that kind of stuff. It takes work is what it takes. I am going next week on a vacation. I'm taking a trip, and you guys may have heard of Orthodox boomer grandma. She's often in YouTube chats, and she has her own channel, and she has this center, she calls it. It's the Union of All Orthodox Christian Healing Arts Center. And she invited me to come down and visit. And I thought, well, I kind of need a vacation. I need to get away. So I had this invitation, and it should be, at least I think, probably warmer there than it is here in Oregon. It's down in California. So I'm going to be traveling next weekend. And I don't know, maybe I'll do a stream from there. That might be good. I'll set it up. That would be kind of interesting. So we'll see. And a reminder that watching YouTube videos, Orthodox content on YouTube, is a supplement to your spiritual life. This is not to replace your spiritual life. It's a supplement. And there's nothing wrong with taking supplements. I take quite a few. So it's a good thing to watch videos, but if you are not attending church and you are only watching videos, I am doing you a disservice. So make sure, if you're maybe just an inquirer and you're thinking about orthodoxy, make sure you get to church. Get yourself to church, or then I will be disappointed if you don't. But I know you do. I know you guys are going to church and you're living the life of Orthodox Christians. So what's up, brother Gavin? Fools for Christ for life. So thank you for joining me. That's my stream today, and I'll see y'all next time. Goodbye.